Candles, there's something like, I know these things to be true, and like that's an opening thing that you do.
Dang it, that's a really good intro, and I really wish I had like the tone for an intro exactly like a 10 Candles intro, but I don't. I have a regular The Top Shelf intro loaded up here.
Well, these things we know to be true.
And one of the things that we know to be true is that Xander Jeanneret is here, everybody. Hi. Ghost Light Patreon, or later and eventually the rest of the world. But for now, the podcast is Patreon exclusive. And so if you're listening to it some other way, what's the future like?
Yeah, or you're a thief.
Yeah, stop it. Caught you in 4K.
Yeah. Xander is here. Alex is here. I am here. And we are going to talk today about one of our favorite systems, 10 Candles. We recommend this system so often. And I was looking back at the series that we all took part in the Geek and Sundry days. And if you want to go watch that, Alex is in episode 2.
Yeah,
Xander is in episode 3.
Yep.
And this was kind of like the first thing that I really got to like wholly direct at GNS. Sort of, kind of in that like it didn't really have a director because we just didn't have a budget for any above the line people at that point, but it was like
we're
really
cleared from the NDAs from that, right? Legendary is not going to come after us. But essentially that's what it was, right? If I remember right, this was towards the end of the days of Geek and Sundry, and there was no budget, and so the idea was Ivan was to run this game that would have a rotating cast because you couldn't pay anybody for more than like a day. If that.
Yeah, I love the idea of this is a weird tangent to start on, but I do love the idea of, hey, we don't have a budget, so let's come up with a show idea that requires 40 cast members.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
This will save us money.
But Ivan had just come off the last thing he had done, I think, was Dread. Or Madness.
Yeah.
And like that was what he was known for on GNS.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, we have this other show that's not going to be able to afford it to bring in a TD. It's not going to have a set. And we're going to use all the talent that we can call favors from.
That was wild.
And Joey, can you run this? And so myself, Ivan, and Denise, Denise came together on this, and boy, what an emotional system to tell a story with.
Yeah, it was sort of like a send-off as well, because we got to involve so many people that had been part of the Geek and Sundry ecosystem over the years.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like because this must have been around season 2 of LA by Night.
I think it's in season 3.
Yeah,
season
like the end
3
of season
starts
2.
airing halfway through.
And I remember just being like, because like I didn't really have anything to do with Geek and Sundry before LA by Night, so like all my friends worked there, but it was like I never really went there.
We showed up for a couple episodes of Gather Your Party, and that was
remind me. And
if you want to dig through the archives of Gather Your Party,
you don't.
You will find Alex. You will find me.
You'll find me.
And
you were all over it.
Yeah,
me and an ex. And so we will, but we were. It was very much like it was the second thing I'd ever done on the channel because I had unless you count Gather Your Party. And which wasn't really, but I was doing a part and I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting game, and I had never heard of it before, and it was very, it was a really interesting thing to do because obviously the conceit of the game is that you're going to die, which gives you a very, unique perspective on your character. It's freeing.
Yeah. Well, just jumping right into it, for 10 Candles, I had a little bit of experience with it before filming, just because my friends, we are LARPers, and so we're constantly looking for experience-based gaming. And I think 10 Candles is a fantastic example to bring like a LARP type setting to a home game. something that is like intimate with your gaming group. And so we had experimented with this format before, and there are elements of it. This also brings to mind Alice is Missing by Spencer Stark, who is absolutely an incredible designer. But again, it's these experiential based game systems that really, you can play it at any experience level, but I think what you're touching on here is it's great for somebody who has a lot of experience in role-playing games, because you get to sort of turn the conceits that you have baked into your mind on their head. For instance, that your character is going to die. And so there's like this weird LARP instinct of like, well, I want to go out in the most fashionable or biggest blowout possible. Or there's like the gamer mindset of like, well, not me. I'm going to be the one that survives, or I'm going to last the longest of anybody. And so it's this play between, and the goal in 10 Candles is the story. Whereas, other games, there are other goals like leveling up or getting this, that, or the other thing.
And I think it's a game that like lets you balance those types of players too, in a way that like a lot of other games don't. Because Xander, I think it was in your episode, who was it that was in Relics and Rarities with
Julia?
Julia, yes.
Had
that gamer mentality completely, and was like, I don't want to die. Why? No, wait, why do I have to? I want to win this. And then like one of her truths was like, I find a hand grenade.
Yes.
That I can use. And Ivan's just
Julia is one of my favorite players of all time, both in Relics and Rarities. She played a bard, and it was like her second time playing D&D ever. And then this was her first experience with 10 Candles, and this is exactly what I'm talking about in a casual home gamer coming to the table and bringing she would always make the most unexpected choices that, for somebody who's been playing games for a long time, you kind of get into a rhythm of like, okay, you're the rogue. I know you're going to do this and sneak attack and da-da-da. When somebody comes and just doesn't know, and they make such interesting choices because of this like lack of knowledge, it is so interesting to me, because it's like a peek into like human psyche and condition.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know the system, 10 Candles is a system that like a Kids on Bikes or something like that, is a collaborative character building. You inform other characters based on virtues and vices and a hope and a breaking point. And that becomes a stack of cards that you can burn throughout the game. The game has 10 candles in the center and dice pools based off of the candles in the center. And so every time you were rolling based off of the candles that are still lit. When a roll fails, a candle goes out, and there are less and less chances for success as the candles go out. So, in a game, you will get halfway through your session, and there will be 9 candles or 8 candles, and then after that it's just entropy just takes you down into the screaming void of Cassandra the cat.
You had mentioned Sagas of Sundry as well. That uses dread, and I feel like horror as a genre plays itself so well to these types of mechanics, because a classic horror story starts off in a very similar fashion of these choices get made and there are low stakes and low consequences. And as the story or the movie or whatever you're taking on goes on, the stakes become raised, the danger becomes higher, and everybody feels that tension. And you're building that tension by removing some of these elements, like the ability to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. I was interesting. I was pulling up my episode of 10 Candles I couldn't remember who was in it. And it's people that like I've still to this day I don't think I've ever played, except for and they didn't list any of our names, which is very cool of them. In the in the comments, but whoever played in LA by Night,
the person whose job it was already probably let go.
Yeah. who played Mark in LA by Night, Erica's partner.
Yes, I don't know his name either.
I don't remember his name, but he was in that. And then Erica Fermina, who I don't think I've played a game with since that.
Yeah.
So, like, and someone else I don't know. So, who I don't even recognize. So I'm like, I don't remember. Also, this was a million years ago. So, like,
yeah.
When did this? Yeah, it's so funny. I was just like looking at this. I was like, oh, hi, hello, yes.
Aww.
Can I help you?
Cat tax.
Oh, thank you for burping.
Yeah, I don't know who that is in that episode. I had to like click in and check real quick.
Also, I didn't know I was the thumbnail for that fucking. You're the thumbnail for the third episode, Xander.
But
cool.
So yeah, it is a game where, you know, whenever a candle goes out, and also if you play with real candles, if a candle goes out by mistake, that's still the end of the scene. So a scene ends whenever a candle goes out. A candle will go out if someone fails a die roll, or, you know, if a candle goes out, that ends the scene. And in between scenes, you get an opportunity, players get an opportunity to establish truths in the world. So you have this horror world, but you can say things that we know to be true in this world.
Yeah.
And it will be things as simple, like the survivalist wants to say things like, we make it out of the house and back onto the highway.
Yeah.
Something like that. Moving the story forward. Or the kind of like what feels almost like hampering the other players, but you're really like progressing the story is so-and-so left their handgun when we left the car. Something like that. And you can say these things, and as you go around, you are establishing these truths. And the way people, I want to say, will weaponize these truths.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not, because they're not using them against each other. They're using them to progress the story.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like the shock value of it, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we were like creating content and stuff. I remember vaguely, because I haven't seen it in a long time, but one of the choices I remember making was like, we were going around saying the truth. Someone said, like, we find an abandoned vehicle or something like that. And I remember having the thought, and I was like, there's a live child in the car seat still. And
the
everyone's
intrusive
like,
thought won in that moment.
Yeah.
And you're just like, immediately like, this story just flipped on its head.
Yeah.
Because now there's an infant involved.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's so funny because it was like, I remember going into that and being like, well, the only thing these people have seen me play, you know, as a performer has been Jasper. It's the only thing I play on this channel.
Nosferatu Playboy.
Yeah. Billionaire philanthropist.
Yeah, the Bruce Wayne of vampires. But I was like,
he does like stalk around at night and attack thugs from the darkness.
He does.
So.
I'm Batman. I am the darkness. What was I saying? I was like, okay, I want to play something different, and I want to play like someone who was just. I think I was like a pizza delivery guy. I was like a Grubhub driver.
Yeah.
Who got like, you know, brought into this, and I was fully just a coward. Like I was like, I'm gonna like any moment I can throw somebody under the bus, I will. And it was, which ended up I think I was the first to die.
Sure.
Because of it, and I kept trying to like get other people killed instead of me, and it just kept not working, and then I got caught. Because I think one of my truths was that I secretly wanted to see what one of these things were. Even though it scared me, I was like, I'm so curious what they are.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a fun mechanic to have, because that's where the role-playing part of it comes in. Like, you almost have secret win conditions in a way, or it's more like motivation for your character with these truths. And they're given to you by other people, which is always really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so Ivan was doing it in a way that, like, the person on the left was giving you your virtue, the person on the right was giving you your vice. I think the other person playing across from you was giving you your hope, and then I think you came up with your break, your like breaking
your
point. Yeah. Or the hope and the limit were flipped around, one of the two.
Like that.
So, yeah. But, like, it is you come in with the character concept, and then from there, the things that inform that character are built by other players. So you're already like, before the game even starts, you are surrendering control to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great place to start from.
Also, it helps to sort of build in a session zero, because a lot of the times with role-playing games, we all come in with these character concepts and backstories, and it's hard to get you to, as a player or a facilitator, to get players to care about other characters' stories. And so with this level of investment, you're already establishing like, well, I'm going to care about this character because I gave them that little thing and I want to see how that plays out. And so you're listening to the storyteller, not just on your turn and waiting for what you're going to do, but you're invested in everyone's story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's such a great way of like removing all of your like preconceived notions with how you play a game. How you play a tabletop RPG, especially coming in, you're like, oh, all these things that I would normally, if I'm speaking from a place of like putting my mindset into a person who plays tabletop games just as a hobby and like plays a lot of D&D, it removes all of those initial goals of like, I'm gonna be a guy who's gonna be a hero who's gonna get stronger to be a better hero and progress. And it's like, no, you're the best you're gonna be at the start.
It's only gonna get worse.
It's only gonna get worse. And it's like, which is such a great way of looking at like character development. It's like, it's never going to get better than this, so like figure that out. Like, which is very cool. And why initially I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to do this, and like and I loved it. So my experience on that was so much fun, and like now I'm finally like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. It was a million years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of the systems that when we were talking about doing other supplemental content on Ghostlight, or something else other than our Chronicle Private Nightmares coming out March 7th. When we were talking about doing other stuff, 10 Candles was always one of the things that we were talking about, like a one shot of 10 Candles, or like having Abria run something, or you run something, or Mayana run something. Or me run something.
Yeah.
10
Candles was definitely one of those things that we're always.
We're all looking for the guy who did this.
Yeah.
We're all looking for the guy who ran the game. It's always been on my list of things because it's just such a simple, wonderful way to tell a horror story.
Yeah. I mean, look, the book is this big. It's other such a simple, straightforward book.
That I really wanted to highlight with this game in particular is, I mean, it's hard when we were on set and you couldn't have like active flames or things like that, and so we would have to But when you're doing it at home and you can have like tea candles and things like that, there is this element of ritual that goes along with all of it. We're all like saying these phrases together, like these things to be true, and then like when you come to your breaking point, you have these paper cards, like note cards that you've been putting things on. You physically burn them with a candle, like when you come to your breaking point, and just the ritual aspect of watching something like that go up in flame, and everybody at the table watching it happen. It's evocative of like religion in a weird way.
It is
like the ceremony of church or a magic ceremony.
The catharsis of it,
very cool.
is like really like hits you.
Yeah.
It's I do like that. I think probably part of what attracted me to the game in the first place, because I do like shit like that. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is a cool vibe. One thing I really like that we did in that show is the recording.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. It was.
I wasn't sure if this was an actual mechanic or like a homebrew thing that we just did, but I don't know. Multiple 10 Candles games.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
I think it's an Alice is Missing mechanic that we just sort of homebrew into 10 Candles.
Yeah, because it's like you record.
Dread I've done.
You record yourself before, and then it was played at the end after you died, and it was a very cool,
a great mechanic.
Which is kind of what the thought, like, kind of I think probably where I fucking took that for these prologues that we're doing for fucking what's my name of the show, Private Nightmares.
Yeah, it's inspired for sure.
Yeah. Well, honestly, looking back at 10 Candles Eclipse, I realized
that's
how
the whole
much
title,
that
yeah.
was
Yeah.
the right. I realized how much that's the progenitor for the production side of Private Nightmares.
Yeah.
When you think, like, when you look at it, like, the camera setup, like where the cameras are positioned is the same, the black space is the same, like the light in the center foreground, and I was like, this was like 5 years ago.
It feels like longer.
It feels like longer, and then at the same time, it also does like feel like, oh, that's only like a few
we just did
few
that.
projects ago.
No, this feels like forever ago. There's nothing else. I feel like I'm a million years old now.
Yeah. Well, with Ivan specifically, he was always trying to push the envelope with horror games, because my first like on-screen RPG was Madness.
Oh my god.
And I remember sitting down to work with him on that, and we along with like Adam Lawson and like the whole cast and stuff, we were like hashing out in real time what something like this could look like, and that was like having the Jenga or the block tower in the center, and then having the chairs around, and us like miming things. They took it to like the next level in that we had a full set with multiple rooms. So we were there for a few days. So we could go into the other rooms to have scenes with each other.
Yeah. Were you on the second season? On
Second
Madness?
season.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
It was such a cool. I remember watching that, being like, "This is wild!" Like the production value was so, and it was like,
and that was my first one, and I'm like, "Oh, this is how you do it."
It's all been downhill from there.
No. Well, then we did We're Alive Frontier, which was the zombie one. We did 2 or 3 seasons of that, and we were always trying to up the onset scares that would happen, like bursting through a wall or setting up the table to come up or whatever. It scared the shit out of me every time.
The amount of
Alpha.
stuff that I was about to say, the amount of stuff that got lost on Alpha.
So I think some of that might still have made it to YouTube, but who knows?
Yeah, but it just like it hits eventually. You know, it does. There's no fanfare to when it. All the buildup was for it landing on Alpha.
Yeah, and so
it's a shame. But if you guys want to go watch it, like, it does exist. It's out there
for sure.
Oh, God, I'm just looking at a picture. I was like, why do I look so young in this? What the fuck happened?
Dread is also Sagas of Sundry. Dread is another like kind of inspiration for how Private Nightmares works. That kind of like sitting around not having the table.
Right.
That was one of the things that I always took from that, of like, oh, this is tabletop RPG sans table.
Right.
That extra level of immersion, I really like that. And Dread is a system that lends itself to it. 10 Candles is a system that lends itself to it. And I think Vampire is a system that lends itself to it. Ultimately, Vampire does have more mechanics. Like, you have to have your sheet down a little bit more. You have to check, and you have to be able to make rolls and things like that, rather than just making a pull in Dread.
Right.
And 10 Candles is kind of like the middle ground, because you still have to roll. It's a D10 system, but you still have to roll, and you're still, but it's a communal pool.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have your individual stats and things like that to roll. You're adding hope die occasionally, but not likely.
Yeah, I think the design principles behind this really was like a pick up and play, something that could be along the lines of like, you need to know how to play something like Monopoly, but you could show up that night and still be ready to play. The same can't be said for a lot of TTRPGs. Like Vampire, it could still be kind of tricky if you show up and try to make a character and do a chronicle like all in one night.
You could do it. It's just a lot of work and long time, you know.
Especially if you're not invested in it, right? If you just show up for game night and you're like, "What are we playing?" and you're like, "I have to learn what's a clan."
Oh, I tried to do that so many times in the early years of being like, "We'll just play a session," and it was just
Alex, I think the most successful you were at that was running that kind of variation of Mortals.
Oh yeah.
That you ran.
Yeah, so I have a thing this was a thing that when my old gaming group from back home, which was very different than how I play games now, but one thing I kind of cannibalized, that was the term I was looking for earlier, cannibalized
Sure.
from that gaming group was a thing that we would do every once in a while as just a, like, we want to play a tabletop RPG, but we don't want to prep anything. And it was just one person would storytell, and it was... The game would start with everybody playing themselves at the table we were sitting at.
Sure.
And then from there, something would happen.
Yeah.
And then and usually we were doing it with the World of Darkness system because that's most of what we played. So at some point, some supernatural thing would happen or some other thing would happen, and you would get powers or something like that, or this world-ending catastrophe would happen. And it was just, you just went from the table you were sitting at and something happened.
That's a great prompt.
Yeah, and it's just, and we just used the base Mortals system, which was just like you built a Mortals character based on yourself, or if we were feeling particularly spicy, you'd make someone else to kind of control them.
That's so good.
And then hand the sheets around, and you had your sheet, and you went from there, and then like as powers developed, you would get the discipline or whatever you had, and like you get potence or whatever, and like it was just, it was fun. It was just an easy thing to do, especially for a bunch of people that knew the World of Darkness system, but nothing else, you know.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one of the selling points for Outbreak Undead, the system that we did for We're Alive, was they had a test that you could take that was the spew test. And essentially, like, you answered a bunch of questions, and it would pop out a character sheet of you for your stats. And so the concept was you could test out your zombie apocalypse theories and see if you would survive.
Yeah,
I like that. I feel like the internet was rife with those at one point, where you calculator to find your Dragon Ball power level. You know, how many push-ups you could do divided by your age, all that, those kind of things, and everyone would come up with like 7.
Yeah. But I think that Vampire also had its roots in a very LARP-based system, because we were out there at night pretending that we were actually vampires. And so I guess this was bringing LARPing into like the home game. It's that like you mentioned, like the in-between.
Yeah, it is like there is such a, like, with the way we started doing LA by Night and the way we started doing all these other shows, we really did kind of blur a line between what was traditionally tabletop and what was traditionally LARP. And mainly that was, are you standing or sitting?
Right.
And so and with our show currently, we've decided to blur that line even more. Right. And but it's such we're
kneeling.
Yeah, kneeling. On one, standing on one leg. And yeah. One leg on a chair like Captain Morgan. And
knee deep in the passenger seat.
I don't know. There's something so... I think to do horror in a tabletop setting, you need to have some form of external visual stimuli for the players themselves to really... It is harder to set a mood in a horror tabletop RPG than it is to set a mood in a D&D. Or like a fantasy classic.
Yeah.
You know,
or even sci-fi. You can just turn on some space noises and you're there.
Yeah, horror. Yeah. To really, like, I do, as someone who plays a lot of horror, and I love horror very much, and it is most of my job, I find it to be almost impossible to truly scare somebody at a table.
Oh.
Like, to really
get somebody... There's a level of investment that the player has to commit to.
Yes. Like, things can be scary, be like, oh, that was scary, like I was nervous or whatever. Like, but to be scared is hard and rarely happens. At least in my experience with, like, playing with people. But my definition of what is truly scary or truly someone being afraid, it could be different from other people's, perspectives.
Yeah. Fair.
I think part of the reason for that is because you want to cultivate a space where people have that ability to eject themselves from the situation. And a lot of times fear comes from not being able to get out of the situation. So what we've talked about bleed many times, of like not the separation between the character's emotion and your emotion. And so to be genuinely scared, but also feel safe enough that you personally can eject at any time. Like there's a razor thin line there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like playing scared is one thing, and convincingly doing so is one thing. You as the player actually being scared is a hard thing to achieve while still holding the integrity of the game together.
Yeah.
You know, the characters can be scared, and you can feel that, like, oh, my character would be scared in this time, and you can play that vibe. To truly do a thing where it's like, without the aid of, like, zombie hands busting through the wall.
Right.
It's hard to do that.
The actual shock. Yeah.
And in my perspective, that is not scaring, that's startling.
Yes.
There's a very distinct line for me.
Startle easily.
Yes. But you weren't like terrified. Like you weren't shaken to the core where you were, and it's because you're at a table with people you know. Like it's like the lights are on, you know, it's like it's this thing of like.
Well, also it was Brad the props guy who was just trying to scare me.
Yeah. That's why, like, you do horror movies, rarely is someone on set actually scared.
Right.
Because we all know what's happening. We can see the camera guy over there. Like, it's like we're doing a thing, you know?
But it's tapping into that.
Yeah.
That I think that as like an actor in a horror movie, there's a sort of like gift that you get to, right?
Yeah.
You get to do that and to push your body to that limits in a similar way that you can in a really good LARP or a really good tabletop session. Like we were talking about Bleed, that your body doesn't know the difference. If you're feeling that emotion, you're going to feel that emotion. And so there is this like rush that comes from like going to a haunted house or being in that environment and staring death in the face. But again, being comfortable and knowing that you have like safety tools in place at the table because that's so important to have a good experience and not cause trauma.
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that like that's it's so hard for a horror game to be able to navigate that, and I think 10 Candles does that very well. And like Alex, like you've talked about playing World of Darkness for a long time, and like what tables have been like in the past of like
how the turntables have turned.
Where people don't have the emotional literacy to make sure that people are safe versus what we had at GNS, which was like a very nurturing space to make sure that everybody's safe. And so not only did we feel that, but we all had a place where we learned the importance of that. And I don't know,
for sure,
Xander, if you knew like how much of that you knew before of like that importance of making sure that everybody's safe, but I definitely learned it at Geek and Sundry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was always this talk, if you were with a good LARP group, you were with a bunch of theater kids. And theater kids, we've known about this. Like, we've done performances where you just get emotionally invested and you're like, why do I have these emotions when I was just playing a character? And so there is this sort of like analysis that comes with it. And then if you get involved with a group of experienced people, they're like, hey, this is going to happen to you, but we want you to keep coming, so just know that this is what's going to happen, and you get a heads up for it.
It's wild. Like, I had never, until we did LA, I had never cried during an RPG before. Well, and
now we can't get you to stop.
I know, I cry all the time. I'm just fucking a mess. It's wild. That's why you don't see me too much, because you have to keep cutting away from me.
Yeah, it doesn't wipe it away.
Yeah, no.
It keeps getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
But it was like at the time when I was playing stuff in home games, like I was not as connected to my emotions as I am now, and like it was just it was such a weird thing to like. I remember the first time it happened, it felt so, I was like, what is going on, you know? And now it's like, now anyone does anything remotely sad in a tabletop game and I'm like,
It also happens in real life too now, where like you're watching an anime and someone does the like whole speech of like, I won't lose, not to you, and then you're just
get me.
Every time.
I can't.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think that the horror is good for that in this like catharsis. But I had mentioned this before, but I've been writing my own system, and I've been doing it live on Twitch with my stream. The first system that I did was based off of the D4, the humble D4. So we called it the D4 tune system, and I made an original setting called Fauna. And once that was sort of fleshed out, we wanted to use that engine, but in a different setting. And so the other game was called Omenthesis, that I'm still currently working on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Yeah. But one of the things that we bump into is telling personal horror and trying to come up with abilities, but bumping up into like accessibility and disability, both in trying to be sensitive about that subject, but also like people's trauma around things like that, and even death or dismemberment, things like that. It's always a conversation of what is safe at your table and what do people feel comfortable exploring, because there is some like deep-seated stuff that you can't predict when you're trying to design these things, because you don't know how home tables are going to go. But for me, I'm trying to put in as much like bumpers and padding as possible to try to soften this or guide storytellers, because once it's theirs, it's their table, and if people have a bad experience, then they're like, oh, this game is bad, and it's like eek.
Not the game's fault, not necessarily,
right?
And like it's so weird coming, like I never, until being a full adult, did I ever have a conversation about what's okay to do in a tabletop game.
Sure.
Like we were playing no bumpers ever on anything ever. It was just like every fucked up idea you thought of was in a vampire game, you know? It was like, which wasn't good. Like, you know, it wasn't, but it was just, I'm still like, part of me is still in that mindset of like, yeah, man, whatever. Nothing you throw at me is going to make me go like, I can't. Because I'm just so used to it.
I was desensitized.
I was desensitized at a young age, and like now I'm just like, yeah, man, I'll go there if you wanna. Like, I don't particularly want to, but like if you throw it at me, I'm gonna go. Like, you know, it's like, which is not a good way to play.
Well, I mean, a weird silver lining about that, especially at that time, is a lot of queer culture and queer identity was deemed taboo. Yes. And so it was a sort of way for people to experiment with either their gender identity or their attraction or whatever through this veil of a character. And so while it may have been like edgy or pushing the envelope, it like seen by society at that time, it may have also been a little bit of healing and stepping forward in this subculture.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, which then leads to like the kind of terrible yes and to that is it equates that exploration of something healthy to somebody else who might be exploring something very unhealthy.
Yes.
And there's no discussion over what's what.
Yeah,
it's so hard. Like everybody has different, you know, lines and veils or whatever you want to call them, and to sit down with the table and be like, and try and find a thing that's satisfying to everybody can be very difficult, because it's like some people want to explore a thing and like, you know, other people are like, I can't go there, and it's just like, well, okay, but I don't want to step on this person's want to explore a certain topic in a safe space, but also I don't want to traumatize someone else at my table, and like, and so it's just very, you know, it's hard to navigate that, and like I am always like, there is a part of me, whether correct or incorrect, that wants to push those boundaries and explore some things that make people a little bit uncomfortable, because I think being a little uncomfortable leads you to places as a performer where you wouldn't normally put yourself within reason.
Right.
Like, getting a little bit out of your comfort zone as a performer, I think, can be very good for you. It can stretch some muscles and make you a better performer in the long run. This is also coming from a perspective of somebody who is a performer who plays these games, and not everybody plays these games like this.
Right.
So, in my opinion, while being a character being put out of your comfort zone, which is a game like 10 Candles can very much do, if you allow it to, can, I think, give you a very rewarding experience, because you were uncomfortable and then you resolve that uncomfortability. And I think that's an important
catharsis.
thing. Get the catharsis of that uncomfortability, which can be a very important thing that is more impactful in a tabletop setting than it is in watching something on TV.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can watch something on TV and be like, oh, that made me uncomfortable. but feeling that because it's you in that situation, and then finding a resolution and being like, oh, I got through that, can be a very, like, you can feel so, it fills you with this confidence of like, I fucking did it. Like, it's like, it's like, which
you
I think
did
is,
it because of the choices that you made, how you thought your way out of that situation. Yeah.
Well, and like, for something to make you uncomfortable on TV, to participate in that doesn't take any level of emotional nuance or something like that. Like, anybody can turn on the TV, and if they find something uncomfortable, it can stop there and be like, that was bad, I don't like that.
Right.
And then never explore why that made you feel that way.
Right.
Whereas when you're playing a video game or playing a tabletop RPG or a LARP or anything like that, you are forced to face that in a different way. You're forced to actualize in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, we had a saying for a long time that LARP is not a spectator sport. It's hard, and it goes against the ethos of like everything that we've done as creators in our whole careers, but whatever. But essentially, it's hard to get somebody to care about like a LARP if you're just watching it from that third person point of view, like through a YouTube video or whatever, because the real, as far as I'm concerned, like the real magic, the real growth from it comes from experiencing those things and being immersed in the environment itself. The exception, I'd say, comes in with horror, in that there is a sort of buy-in that we're asking the audience to do, and it is a sort of role play in that you are asked as an audience member to suspend your disbelief and potentially be scared or be affected emotionally by whatever is going to happen on screen.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think any entertainment is more enjoyable if you decide to buy into it.
Oh, 1,000%.
100%. Yeah.
Like
1,000.
1,000%. Don't even go that high.
And like, I think there's something about the slow burn of something like 10 Candles and
literally
Vampire as well. Yeah, right. That helps ease people into that buy-in, and tabletop games in general, because in a world of YouTube where it's the rest of my work is making 10 to 15 minute YouTube videos where it's like, okay, you gotta hook me real quick, you gotta be funny, you gotta do the thing, and then making like 3-hour content. It's like, no, you're here for a while.
You're not here for a good time, you're here for a long time. I am.
Yeah,
a time will be had.
Right.
And so that buy-in, the audience understanding, like already committing to that, means that you can kind of bring them in a much more methodic way, and bring them to different emotional states that you could not do in a 10-minute video or something like that.
Absolutely. And like, people get connected to these characters so often because they've spent so much time with them. Right? You're listening for these things. Like, if you get attached to a movie, that's 2.5 hours max with those characters, maybe a sequel. But for this, we're doing 3 hours at a pop, like for a role-playing session, and people are consuming this. How they consume it, I think, is different too, because
some people do it in the stages, some people,
stages, they do it as their entertainment at night, or they do it while they do chores, or it's just a different medium.
Yeah, with LA by Night alone, we produced over 100 hours of content, and that's
absolutely
crazy to think about.
And some people have listened or watched that multiple times.
Yeah.
I lived through it, and I couldn't do that.
Oh, I couldn't go back and fucking watch it. Are you kidding me?
No way.
Yeah.
You're like, why did you do that? What voice? What face was that? Why did you?
Yeah. The ability to suspend disbelief while watching your own performance is.
It's hard. It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
That'd be hard. Yeah. Speaking of our own performances, Xander.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Gable?
Gable, yes.
As long as no spoilers for the actual first episode, but anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're familiar with Gable from the prologue.
Like just to set, exactly, to set the scene. You're already on it. You're such a good host, and I should know to trust you.
Yeah, because I host the podcast now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking for a co-host, honestly.
I'm not good at it.
You are.
So with Gable, we have seen Gable was the initial prologue to be released. That was the first introduction that the audience had to this new world of vampire that we were going to explore. Our first unofficial foray into the world of darkness. Tell us a little bit about, kind of what you wanted to do with this character.
Well, first things first is I wanted to make Gable different than Braun, and then different than X for sure.
Yeah.
And so it was like pulling on I have like a Rolodex of like different character sort of things, ideas to put together. And Gable was a sort of mashup of a few different ideas. And so it's been interesting to see Gable come to fruition like as a fully formed person, especially because one of the like a bit of the feedback that I got after doing the prologue, really that was my first time spending a lot of time in Gable as a character, and people on set were saying like, oh, that felt like a real person that I know. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay, that's a cool, like that felt very validating as an actor of like tapping into just like making a person.
I'm so interested to see, because like before seeing Gable, I've seen you come in to RPGs so surgically and have this goal in mind to facilitate other players' dreams and other characters' goals.
Right.
And the snarky selfishness to Gable is, I think that's going to be so interesting to explore.
That's one of my favorite things, because the one thing that ties together X and Braun and Gable is like, I'm going to be a little shit at the table, and I'm going to make my little jokey jokes, and I'm going to try to weave it into this story and character as much as I can, but I can't control my mouth.
Gotta make a character who can get away with a one-liner. That's what I learned from New York by Night. The amount of times where like something would pop into my head and I was like, Ray would never.
Right.
Ray would never say that.
Oh yeah, no, like there were plenty of times with Isaac where I was like, Isaac isn't funny.
Yeah.
I was like, Isaac doesn't get to say funny stuff. He's just a weirdo. Like,
you just like whisper it to my audio. You're like, quick, say this. It's a good line. I can't say it.
No, Jasper could be snarky and mean and funny, but like but with full intention of hurting someone's feelings. Like he wasn't like, hey, we're having a good time. He's like, no, I'm gonna bite your fucking head off. Like, and so, but he could only be funny and silly with X. That was the conceit, was that Jasper could only be funny and silly when he was with X. Like, because X,
which I enjoyed,
fucking did not care one bit about what Jasper was like whether Jasper hated himself or not. X was like, no, you're gonna be goofy, and I was like, all right, well.
What is wild to think about when like going back in time to that time period too, we knew each other like as casual acquaintances. We had like a few friends that were, and we had been at parties and stuff like that.
Yeah, we had met through Brian Forrest, I believe.
Yes. But we didn't really like get to know each other until we were sort of forced to be together with this role, and then it worked out so well.
Which is weird because like we've talked about the fact that you were not forced to be together because you came in when he wasn't there.
Yeah,
true.
As a friend of Jasper was like,
our characters were friends.
And then, well, which to be fair, I wasn't. I didn't know almost anybody from that cast when I started.
Sure.
I had
with Erica, if I remember, or did that happen
afterwards? It was afterwards that we got to know each other better, but it was like I knew who she was. We had worked at LOJ together once,
right?
Because she played Puck at LOJ, if I remember. For those of you who don't, when I say LOJ, for those of you who are podcast, there is a masquerade ball that happens every year in Los Angeles called the Labyrinth of Jareth. Anyway, that's what LOJ
I was
stands
a dancer in the fairy room with Sin.
and that's I knew Sin from LOJ as well.
Yeah.
And so, but I did not know B Dave. I didn't know anybody. I knew you vaguely, and I knew you worked a lot at Geek and Sundry. And when I was like, oh shit, we started the show, and now I'm shooting this movie, and I'm gonna be gone for like Fridays for night shoots. Yeah, and like
back when we were live and you had to be there Friday at 8 p.m.
Yeah, and I was like, oh fuck, and then we were like, well, Xander's like, let's get Xander in to do it, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, like I trust Xander, he knows what he's doing, and like, and having like only by reputation of you being a tabletop role, I was like, yeah, he'll be fine, and like, and then it was, then I didn't know exactly how absolutely fine you were gonna be, like it was like as that character, and you came in, I was like, holy shit, okay. Because I just absolutely fell in love with that character, and then you and I got to be closer, and it was great. Like it was so nice.
Yeah. Well, now I get to inflict all of that onto you as opposed to Jason, because I would come in with some strong swings with X and a few things that got denied, which I won't talk about because I still might bring them up. But things with Braun also got the kibosh that I was like, okay. But I mean.
I had a lot of stuff with Jasper and Isaac that like either never came up because Jason just weaved around it, or like I was like, what about this? And he was like, and I was like, but I wanna.
Right. And to his credit, there is something to be said about having a one vision that brings everything together. And I enjoy, like, I think I've mentioned this before, but I enjoy structure in my creativity. I feel like structure sets me free because it gives me like a bounding box that I can even think outside of, or it's my interpretation of a prompt or a category.
Give me some walls to parkour off of.
Yes, exactly. I want to bounce off some stuff. I want to be like, I want to push on the edges of a wall, but I want the walls to be there.
Exactly that. And so I think with Gable, I'm able to sort of push in a different direction, both against you as like the storyteller, and in the prologue being the beast, meaning like an inner part of Gable.
Yeah.
Like getting on a real personal note, some of the stuff with Gable that Gable like exhibits are things that I have been criticized for in the past. For instance, being like too effeminate, or for one thing or another, whether it was an acting role or just being bullied in life.
Yep.
And so it creates a lot of these like barriers, and for me, like this internal homophobia that I'm still working on because I've gotta. And so playing a character like Gable, who has embraced some of these aspects of like their femininity or this love for dance that maybe they had embraced in a different way than I did, and tried to like make a career out of it, and then like with the talk of the embrace being possibly related to an STI or to like even HIV. When we were discussing like the themes of like private nightmares and the different prompts and things like that, these are things that I am like genuinely afraid of. And the biggest thing that I had to sit down with my own mother and have like a conversation with her, because I mentioned it briefly in the prologue, but it may come up in the future for Gable, of just having a really bad relationship with his birth parents.
Yeah.
And I had to be like, Mom, this is a nightmare scenario. This is not you. This is not based off of you. There are no similarities. So don't think that this is me. But this is like, so my sweet nightmare if I hadn't been accepted in the way that I was. And what, like, how I would have possibly dealt with that, or what different type of a person I would have been as a result of that trauma, on top of being a vampire,
No, exactly. Like it's very much like, that is an interesting. That's very sweet that you had that conversation with your mother. But like, it is a thing.
She watches all my stuff, and I don't want her watching it being like, "Is this me?"
Yeah.
Like, no.
Mom, what are your lines and veils?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things that was interesting. Of like, and coming from an acting background into into true where I play tabletops now. It was very much something that I had to go through of like understanding that the separation of self and character doesn't come easily to some people. And it was something I was taking for granted, because it was something I was so used to doing that I was like, yeah, you could say anything to me while I was in character and I would never think you were mad at me.
Right.
But not everybody deals with it that way. And there were a couple of times where during LA by Night, I had said some things in character and some other people were like, hey, are you mad at me? And I was like,
Right.
what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean? Like,
acting. Yeah.
And then I realized I had to like check in with people afterwards, and that was the first time I had ever encountered having to like check in with somebody after doing a game or anything. Because I again grew up playing tabletop where we didn't give a shit if we hurt each other's feelings. Like it wasn't even a concept, and it was just. And so I was like, "What do you mean your feelings are hurt? Like what?"
What was that like for X? Because like at times X got vicious.
Yes,
I loved it.
I found again so much catharsis in playing X. Especially on those episodes where I got to dive into like the true horror of what was going on behind the scenes with him, right? Because I'm not gonna lie, going into it, I wanted to play like this clown-like character and then have like a mirror crack moment, or like get the audience to fall in love with the clown, and then it's actually very sad. Huh?
Show them the shirt.
Yeah, exactly that. And so that was one of the concepts that I had with X going from the beginning, unaware at the time of the moniker of a fish malk. Yeah. But I came to learn that phrase very quickly. As for people who may not be familiar, the stereotype for somebody who plays a Malkavian, especially in a LARP scenario, is that they're just like a goofy little waha. I just say things and I pull out a fish for no reason, so it's a fish malk. Like I've seen it. It happens. Yeah. I've played with them. I've been them. It's fine. It's a fun, different way to play it. But where I got to show this other like darker side of X is just a monster, just like everybody else, and especially X, who is being used as a tool and had their mind wiped and their name taken from them. There are a whole bunch of things that made his situation really awful. And to be able to have, because a lot of time it was be like after an hour or two of play and like having it all build up and then finally be able to just was so rewarding. And have it bounced back and volleyed, not only by Jason, but by the other players. I remember
an episode specifically where I was just feeling this like just stuff radiate off you, and it was fully like infecting me, and I was getting upset, and I was just and I was just like, fuck, because I think it was at the end of a full 5 days straight of shooting vampire, and we were all exhausted, and we were just like, fucking whatever.
We were exhausted, we didn't know what else to do, and so we were in our feelings, and we were just yelling at each other.
For people who don't know, like the behind the scenes of the production, we went from shooting this once a week and going out to a bar afterwards and like talking about it to shooting
batches,
5 episodes back to back, and then like going home.
Because
it was also kind of like Omicron era. When we were doing.
Because it was like 8. It was 2 a day.
It was 2 a day
for 5 days.
For 5 days.
I thought we had like a gap in the middle.
Maybe we had one day, so it was like a full 8 episodes.
Jason, his brain would have been fried.
Yeah, he needed at least the day to write.
It
was not he was like, I want more time.
Which I fully, after having shot what we've shot so far, I'm like, I get it.
I also want more. We're in it. So that's one of the nice things about the batch shooting is that like you get this craving for vampire and you get to play it the next day, but it is exhausting.
So I had a revelation as you were talking about LARP. So I've never LARPed. And you, as someone who's done LARP and tabletop RPGs, let me know if this kind of like sounds right. But a character for LARP and a character for tabletop RPG, or a version of X for LARP and a version for tabletop RPG, and probably why you get like the fish malks, is that who is your audience when you're LARPing?
Right.
How often are they seeing you? And to have a slow burn change for someone who's only seeing you 10% of the time would become incongruous. If they're seeing you at the beginning of the night and then seeing you at the end of the night and you're a completely different character. The instinct is to go, oh, well, that's someone like losing the thread of what they're doing, and not seeing like with the audience, the captive audience that you get for LA by Night. they're seeing the slow change in X.
Right.
Is that something that you think about when playing characters for tabletop versus LARP?
Yes. And a step further than that, too, is this utility that I will bring. It just reminded me of one of my favorite characters that I bring to one of the in-person fantasy LARPs out here. And the concept is it's a wizard who has no short-term memory. And so it's like a magically induced amnesia, which lets me get away with not remembering characters' names with relationships that I've had before, because that's just tapestry. Totally. He just forgets things.
Yeah.
But also B, I get to create some amazing moments for people that are willing to put in the time to invest in my character's story, because you'll get hints of things. I have my little sayings and phrases and things that I'll wander around camp saying. And if people, that's me playing my own game and finding the fun in LARP, I feel like I did a similar thing with X, in that I would get visions or something like that and try to weave it in so that it looked as though I was predicting things, but really it was just trying to put the pieces in place for a domino fall.
It was very cool watching you do that. Because that is not... I was watching you do that being like, I don't know how the fuck you're doing that. Like, I was just like, that's not how I work. And I was just like, holy shit. Like you doing the prophecy stuff, I was like, does that mean anything? Like, I was like, I know where you're, like, I can see where you're pulling some shit from, but I was like, and part of me was like, did you get, info from Jason or what? And I was like, this is really cool watching you do this and just being like, I don't know what any of that means. All right. Because also, like, I knew so little about the story because I made Jason not tell me. I was like, I don't want to know what's happening. I want to be a guy who doesn't, unless I need to know it or it was something I would know. Like,
and that's a form of immersion, too.
Yeah.
That's very, like, LARP mentality of, like, I want to experience it in real time.
I think there's something, like, it depends on the character, because it depends on how close the character is to you. Right? Yeah. If your instinct is close to the character, then I think that is a safer space, or maybe an easier place to be. But if you're trying to play something that's so different from you, then it oftentimes helps to know a little bit, so that you have that moment to go, okay, this is how I would react. Don't do that.
Filter. Yeah.
How would this character react?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that comes into play a lot with how we play Vampire the Masquerade. It's this filter of, like, I can metagame, I know what I would do here. My knowledge of Vampire the Masquerade is XYZ, but this is what Gable's going to do, because this is where Gable's coming from, and that's their point of view and their perspective. And I think exactly what you were talking about is correct, and it's the different levels of willing to play is what you're looking for out of the game, right? So if I'm going to a LARP and I just want to, like, disassociate and just play like a fantasy character, then whatever. But if I want to go into something with a mission or an intention of, like, what would it be like if somebody with Alzheimer's was trying to cast magical spells, and what could go wrong, and what would be like the impact of that? Or what if somebody was turned into a vampire against their will? How would they deal with that in the nights that come,
Yeah, exactly. Like, and there's so many, I've said this before on the podcast, I think, but Vampire is making essentially two different characters. You're making who you are as a human, who you are as a beast, and, like, it gives you freedom to really make two juxtaposing people, which is great, it really gives you a lot of room to explore. It's just such a, I really, like, you do such great work, and, like, then whenever you're on a thing, you always fully commit to these really great characters, and I'm so I very much was like, just when we were starting the show, I was like, I want these people, and like immediately I was like, I want Xander, I want, like,
we made this show as an excuse to spend more time with Xander. It's really,
everybody else get fucked.
No, but I am really grateful for you asking me to be a part of this too, because I know I wasn't part of the original season 1 cast for New York by Night that had clicked so well. But I feel like having done a bit, like I really gel with everybody, and it is just an honor to be able to explore some of this with you.
Yeah,
because I feel like we're all trying to play at this higher level and discover some things that haven't been done before.
Yeah, and I also feel that way, and I really hope we do that. But
Yeah.
I don't think of you as not part of the, because like you came in so early, like you were there in episode 2, you know. It's like so it's like you were in LA by Night from the beginning as far as I'm concerned, and like I know it wasn't official as a quote unquote main cast member till later, but you were in so much of it, and also even when you weren't there, you were so much part of the story. So like it's like
just force your way in, cause some problems, and then you're good. That's my role playing advice.
Well, so I cannot wait for the audience to see more of
I'm gonna
Gable.
kill you.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh.
Fucking leave me alone.
Aww. God, I wish I was that cat right now.
Oh man, guys, you are going to love meeting Gable and the rest of the coterie. One of the things that Alex, do we want to talk about this a little bit?
I don't know what it is.
We can mention this a little bit. When you are seeing the prologues,
Yes.
those prologues are the moment that those characters are turned.
Yes.
That's not necessarily the character that you are meeting
No.
when the coterie, like when the chronicle starts.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know.
So yeah.
You want to tell them a little bit
I
about?
can tell them a little bit about that.
How far into it are we?
So, yeah, as you said, what you see in the prologue is the frozen in time moment within their mind as they transition from human to kindred. Or at least when the beast fully takes hold. I know that like the process differs from person to person, and like Nosferatu, whatever, can be different. But like I was framing it as the moment the beast fully like settles in to the person, and then the transformation can take time afterwards. But the beast is there. When you see the characters in the show, time has passed. So they are no longer necessarily the exact same as they were the moment you saw them, because they have lived a little while now with that beast. And so it may have already changed them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And Patreon subscribers are the only ones that have seen the prologue so far. So when the chronicle starts, you will have an insight into these characters that nobody else does.
Yes.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Just look in your chat. They seem to know a lot about
I
what's
know.
going on.
Also, thank you so much to my chat from my Twitch channel that keeps informing me of what's happening, because I don't know.
We are bad at communicating.
No. I don't pay attention.
No, I get it.
We're only so many people. We're trying to make a show.
Yeah, there's a 5-person cast. Me and Joey and Tom, like that's who's working on this. Like,
I still remember a couple of weeks ago, someone in my chat came in and they're like, I listened to the latest Top Shelf episode, and full chest, I was like, what's that? And they're like, it's your podcast. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, that's right. This is the Top Shelf, starring Xander Jeanneret. And we will catch you next week with another episode. And be sure to check out Private Nightmares when it airs on March 7th. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Perfect.